All right, so let's take a look at some of your answers. Oh, that's a good story. Yep. Good. 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 Yep. Sad, but true. Good. 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 That's a good example. Good. 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 All right, next one. Also to be done on your own. What impact will your belief in effort or ability have on your performance in this class? What impact will your belief in effort or ability have on your performance in this class? All right, so let's take a look at some of your answers. Good. Okay. So there are a couple things. There are a couple things that I'd like to point out, and a couple things that I'd like to focus on. And first of all, is looking at this idea of effort versus ability. I think it's kind of interesting, sort of how we view the world and how we view effort versus ability. And this view that we have on effort versus ability actually has a pretty big impact on the future of our lives and the future of where we go in school, and also maybe helps to explain the past. I think as Americans, we tend to get caught up too much on this idea of innate ability. This idea that I was just born good at something or born bad at something, and that processes aren't learned. And so even as you read the sheet over there, many of you said, well, I'm just good at social studies, or I'm bad at social studies. And you saw, hey, I'm just not good at civics. It's not my thing. Or maybe I am good at civics, and it is my thing. And either way, this is the wrong kind of framework to have. This idea that we're just born good or bad at something. Let me give you a couple examples. One example was myself when I was in, let's see, elementary school, middle school, most of high school. I was really good at math. I considered myself to be a math wizard. I was awesome at it. And I said, you know what? It's just because I'm good at math. I'm awesome at math because I was just born good at math. I was born better at math than most of my classmates. I just had a natural ability to be successful in math. And then geometry came around. I took my first geometry class, and I can remember to this day my teacher, Ms. Kingsmith, telling us, you need to study for geometry. You need to study for this. You need to study for math. And I thought she was crazy. I said, look, lady, I'm awesome at math. I was born with the innate ability to do good in math. I don't need to study for it. It turns out she was right. It turns out I did need to study for math. My grade on my first geometry test was not very good. I didn't fail it, but I think I got a D- on it. I think I was a couple points away from failing. And it was the first time in my life. At the time, I was angry at her because I said, well, I get an A on every math test I ever take. Why is this any different? So I went to talk to her, and she said, well, did you study? And I said, no, because I'm awesome at that. I don't need to study. She said, well, maybe if you would have studied, you'd know this stuff. Because at the end of the day, there are some things that we get faster than others. There are some bits of information that we take in faster than others. But at the end of the day, we're not born good or bad at it. It's stuff that is learned. Some stuff we learn quicker than others. Some stuff that, especially at the basic level, some stuff comes quicker than others. But we're not born good or bad at something. On the first day of class, I asked you to name your senators and representatives on that sheet of paper. Some of you could do it. Some of you couldn't. Whether you could or couldn't do it, it's not because you were born with an innate ability. It's not like, wow, you were born and you magically knew who our two senators were, or you magically knew who our representative was. That's something that was learned at some point in time. That's something that if you knew it, you already learned it, and if you didn't know it, you didn't learn it. It's not an innate ability kind of thing. It's just, did you learn it or did you not? And so I think a lot of times we get caught up with this idea of innate ability. Who's the greatest basketball player of all time? I'll give you credit. That's an original one. Most people usually go with the LeBron versus Jordan argument. Michael Jordan, anybody read his biography? Tell me about Michael Jordan's basketball career. High school. Well, tell us what happened.
Well, everyone always was told that the cut from the varsity team was actually his injury. As a freshman, he got cut from the varsity team and played on JV, then scored like 50 points a game, and then got moved up to varsity. So I said what everyone knows is true.
You're right, but you're missing the detail in between. It's true. As a freshman, he tried out for the varsity team. He got cut from the varsity team, and he went on to play JV. But it's not that, this misnomer that he got cut. But what a lot of people don't know is the coach looked at him and said, son, you're not good enough to play basketball. Like, yeah, you'll probably play JV and you'll do okay, but don't plan on a career much past that. Go stick with something else, because you weren't born with the innate ability to play basketball. You're not good enough at basketball. You don't have the figure. You don't have the natural skills and abilities. Like, you're decent. You're good enough for our JV team, but don't bother thinking about varsity because you're not going to make the varsity team. You are not good enough to do it. Now, at the end of the day, Michael Jordan didn't say, well, I just want to play JV. He worked at it. He worked harder and harder and harder, and he tore up the JV. I mean, he was scoring like 50 points a game. He did some insane stuff, and eventually he goes on to play varsity and become the greatest basketball player of all time. And we can debate that on a different day. Who's the best and who's not. There is something to be said for some natural ability. Look, sometimes no matter how hard you work at something, you may not ever become the greatest to ever live at it. When I was a young kid, I was inspired by Michael Jordan, and I would shoot hoops every day, and I would work as hard as I could. And man, I put a whole lot of effort into trying to become the greatest basketball player that ever lived. And it turned out that I wasn't even the greatest basketball player in my driveway. I wasn't very good at it, no matter how hard I worked at it. But when I did work at it, I did get better. I mean, it started out where I couldn't make a layup, I couldn't make a free throw, I couldn't make a shot to save myself. Now, I'm still not great at basketball, but I got a heck of a lot better the more I practiced, the more I worked at it. If you've got this idea that you will not be successful in this class or anywhere in general just because you were born good or bad at something, You're holding yourself behind. You're slowing yourself down. You've got an inaccurate framework of really what the world looks like. And this is a time when you don't want to fall behind. In our society, in our world today, knowledge and skills are more important now than they've ever been before in human history. And so if you just give up on yourself and you just say, look, I'm not good at civics, so I'm not even going to bother, you're going to fall behind. You're not going to do well. And that's going to hurt you. If you've got this framework that you can't do well at something, you're probably not going to. Henry Ford once said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're probably right. And a lot of this is because of how much effort you put into it. Look, Henry Ford failed at the first 2 car companies he started. Started one company, failed miserably. Built like 20 cars, went out of business. Started a second company, didn't do so hot. Did a little bit better, but had a disagreement with management. It took him till his 3rd try before he got the company that he wanted the way he wanted. It's all about how much effort you put into it. And yes, there's a little bit of natural ability in there, but Henry Ford didn't get good at what he did because he was just born good at what he did. He just kept working on it. And when he failed at it, he just kept trying harder and harder and harder until he finally got it. But if you don't work at something, you're not just holding yourself behind, you're also going to hold our class behind. If you don't put in the effort, if you don't put in the work, you're going to get pretty bored pretty quick, and you're going to make our class pretty boring pretty quick. Like today when I went around and stamped your effort versus ability articles, and like maybe 15-20% of you didn't do it. Okay, yeah, that hurts yourself, but it also hurts the class, because when I said turn to a partner and discuss the article, if you didn't read the article, it's pretty hard to discuss the article. It's pretty hard to come up with examples. And so then you're going to find yourself getting bored, because as we go through the examples, the Confucian example or the physician example, whatever example, the math problem example, whatever examples we use, if we're talking about it, you're like, I don't know what the heck they're talking about. I have no idea what that is. It's going to get pretty boring for you. And if you don't put in your half of the work, it's going to be a pretty poor discussion in class as well. Trying to talk over what we just learned and what we just discussed, it's hard to talk about it if you haven't read it. And so you're going to slow our whole class down. But not only that, you're going to slow our entire school down. Our school has a focus that every student is capable of learning and capable of succeeding. Our school believes that it's all about the amount of effort that you put in. And when students don't succeed, for whatever reason, if you get lazy, if you give up on yourself, the school doesn't care. They still want to try to find a way to help you learn. I gotta say, probably 75% of every meeting I go to is talking about how do we get the bottom third of students to the top. How do we help those students who are struggling, especially those students who are failing classes, especially those students who are getting D's and even low C's. How do we get them to improve their performance? A few years ago, as part of a program at this school, it was for students who were struggling freshmen. They went through any freshman who failed at least 2 or more classes, and they asked them to join a program. They had about 20 students per school in the program, so 60 for the 3 combined. And they had 4 teachers in each building working the program. So they had 12 teachers total working the program. They would run the program 2 days a week for an hour and a half a day. They would pay the teachers $20 an hour to run it. So if you start to think about this, this is a lot of money that's being expended to try to help these students. They also had buses to take the students home. They also had a director to run the program. I asked that director how much she thought the program cost. She estimated that probably between $25,000 to $30,000 was being spent in a year to try to help about 50, 60 kids succeed. The most frustrating thing for me is when I would work with those students on study skills and trying to help them, the biggest thing that they would say is, well, I'm just not good at school. Don't even waste your time helping me because I'm not good at this. I just wasn't born good at it. So I think where we last left off, we had said that there are some implications of effort versus ability. We had said that if we truly have an ability-based model, either we're born good at something or born bad at something, that's going to affect us. It's going to hurt us. If we think that we're just automatically good at civics or automatically bad at civics, it means we're never going to improve. We're never going to get any better, and we're going to start to fall behind. And this is an era, this is a generation when knowledge is more important than it's ever been before. We also said that that doesn't just affect you as an individual, it affects our class. We said that class will be really boring if you don't do the work, if you don't put in the effort. So we looked at the example of yesterday's homework. We had group activity where you worked with a couple people. If the person that you were working with didn't do the reading, it is probably a very boring discussion, probably not that great of a discussion, and probably class was a little bit difficult for you yesterday. Did we talk about what schools do to catch you up on the racetrack? Okay. So one of the things I think is really crazy is the amount of money that schools spend trying to catch students up. And if students truly are struggling because they're struggling, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm all in favor of spending thousands of dollars to help students. But if the sole problem is the student just doesn't want to learn, I told you about that program I was a part of, and a lot of the students, when I would work with them, I'd say, did you do the reading? Well, no. Why not? Oh, I just didn't feel like it. All right, well, let me help you with your homework. No, that's okay. I don't want to do it. But I can help you with it. No, I don't want to do it. And when people give up on themselves without even trying, school wastes a lot of money trying to catch people up. But it's not just about you as an individual. It's not even about our class. It's not even about our school. It's all about our society as a whole, American society. If I am the first to tell you this, I'm sorry. But America is falling behind in the world. America is no longer the great country in the world that we used to be, or maybe even the great country in the world that sometimes we think we are. See, there were two things that used to give America an advantage in the world. There were two things that used to make America great. Number one, our level of education. America used to be much more well-educated than almost any other nation on earth. We used to have far superior education to everybody else on earth. And guess what? Today, the rest of the world is catching up. There are more people in the country of India with a college degree than there are people overall in the United States. Other countries are catching up when it comes to education. We're no longer the only well-educated country in the world. We're no longer the country that tries to catch everybody up on the racetrack by giving lower income families a shot at school. Other countries are catching up. Other countries are doing the same thing. The other thing that used to give America an advantage is that we would work harder than everybody else. When you look at why people left Great Britain and came to America, when you look at the Industrial Revolution, why it was so successful in America and not in other parts of the world, America had this undying spirit, this undying will to work harder than just about anybody else, any place in the world. And we're losing that. That advantage that we once had, it's no longer there. Now, that's not to say that we're not hard workers, and that's not to say that we're not well educated, and that's not to say we're not still one of the top countries in the world. But we're falling behind. Or maybe not we're falling behind, but everybody else is catching up. So again, if you look at the country of India, there are more people with a college degree in India than people combined in the United States. Which means when businesses choose where they're going to go, before it was a no-brainer. You go to America because you got all the smart people there. But if there's smart people in other parts of the world, that one thing that separated us doesn't anymore. And so then the other thing you look at, what made America great, is hard work. The fact that we were willing to work harder than just about anybody else. And we're starting to lose that too. There was a study done, I forget the exact statistics, so I may estimate and round a little bit here. I also forget the exact restaurant, but I think it was a McDonald's. McDonald's did a test run, a study a few years ago, where they decided that they were going to outsource the drive-through window. For a few select McDonald's restaurants, you would pull up to the drive-through window, and when you pulled up to the drive-through window, instead of placing your order to somebody within that building, when you talked into the speaker, it would go to a call center in India. That person in India would then take your order, they would type it into a computer, they would send it back through the internet to that store, to that McDonald's restaurant, where somebody would make your burger, they put it in the bag, send it out the drive-thru window, and you're good to go. It is crazy, right? I mean, bizarre to think, why would we want to do something like that? They found that even when they paid the Indian workers the exact same amount of money as they paid the American workers, that the Indian workers were about 30% more accurate. They were about 20% more efficient, and they were less likely to call off for work. They were less likely to call in and skip their jobs. So if you've got a more reliable worker who is going to do a more accurate job and increase your efficiency, I mean, if you're a business owner, where can you go? Who are you going to hire? Panera's already starting to outsource, but instead of giving the jobs to call center in India, they've just given it to a computer now, right? So you walk into Panera and you just type in your order on a computer. You don't even need somebody to take your order. All aspects of life are changing, and the people who are successful are the people who are highly motivated and highly educated. That's what has always set America apart from the rest of the world, and that's what continues to set America apart from the rest of the world. If we are more highly educated and more motivated to do stuff, we're going to succeed. Go back to the example that you guys read about. Let's assume that you are a business owner. You have to hire 2 workers. Let's assume that they are identical in every which way. But the only difference is one person gets a math problem and they give up after 3 minutes. The other person works 10, 15, 20 minutes trying to find a solution to that same math problem. Who are you going to hire? The one who gave up or the one who worked their tail off to get to the result? Right? I mean, if you're a business owner, you're going to hire the one who worked hard. Oh, and by the way, you guys know that in a lot of these other countries, the people who are not only working harder with an equal level of education, but they also are willing to work for less money than most Americans. And so when you start to think about that, we're in a really competitive world. And to get jobs to come back to America, we've got to do something better than other places. It's not to say that people won't make stuff built in America, because people will. If Americans will build a high-quality product, we're probably even willing to pay a little bit more for it to have it, say, made in America. But it's got to be high quality, and you got to get what you pay for. The other thing that we often assume about foreign-made goods is they're not as good as stuff made in America. Those workers don't do a good job. Yeah, they work for less money, and yeah, they might be educated, but you can't get the same quality as you get in America, right? Think again. Look at most of the designer clothes you wear. Most of that stuff's made overseas. Every single one of you, if you think that if you think that foreign countries make junk, pull out what's in your pocket. You've got, how many of you have an iPhone? It was designed in California, made in China. You didn't pay $700 to $1,000 for your iPhone because it's junk, because it's poorly assembled, because the workers did a bad job of doing it, right? You pay that money because it's a quality product. And if we start to look at other products too, why products are leaving the United States, why we're not making stuff here, it's because you can make them other places, get the same quality, but you can do it for less money and with a more motivated workforce. So going back to the idea of effort versus ability, really, it's not just about you, it's not just about the class, it's not just about the school, but it's about our society. The world is changing, and it's changing pretty quickly. And if we don't keep up with these changes, we're going to fall behind. America needs to prove that we still have that work ethic that we've always had, that we're harder working than everybody else. The trade hustles harder, right? And we have to be willing to go that extra step, to put in the effort it takes to be successful. Any questions? Thoughts? Buy into this? Do you not buy into this? You wanted to stop? Okay. Talk about this class for a second. And sort of why this class. Sort of what you can get out of this class. How many of you plan to go into history or government, something related to that one day? Nobody. Not one of you. Hey, it's cool. No offense. How many of you think you'll use history or government in your daily life at some point in time in your career? Okay, good. You were paying attention last week when we did that thing where almost everything in some weird way relates back to government. But even that, I think there are 4 things you can take from this class, even if you're not going into government, even if you want nothing to do with government later on in your life. No matter what you go into, there are 4 things that you will take away from this class, if you're putting in the effort, that will help you in your career no matter what you do. Number 1, public speaking. I can already tell many of you are like me in high school. Me in high school, I was the kid, I got B's on my tests and stuff, and I wanted to sit in the back of the room. I didn't want anybody to call on me. I just wanted to mind my own business and leave me alone. But what I found is that doesn't help prepare you for the future. See, no matter what you go into, no matter what type of job, no matter what type of business you go into, public speaking is going to be a big part of what you do. You might not have to get up in front of a room and make a presentation, but you got to communicate with people no matter what you go into. And if you can't communicate with people, you're going to struggle. So why don't you use school as a training ground? If you're shy, if you're quiet, if you're not good at public speaking, if you're nervous with public speaking, try raising your hand a couple times in class. This is the area to practice and get good at something that you're not so good at. Remember, we talked about the purpose of school is to catch you up on the racetrack, to catch you up on the most valuable skills necessary to be successful in the world of tomorrow. And one of those skills is public speaking. One of those skills is being able to talk and interact with people. Honestly, the reports that I'm reading say that businesses want to hire people who are good public speakers more now than ever before. And yet every statistic shows that with the advent of computers and cell phones and online, we tend to do less and less talking than we've ever done before. And so it makes somebody who is a good public speaker a rare talent. Treat school like a sport. School is like a sport. Public speaking is like a sport. You got to practice at it. You got to work at it. You're not just born good or bad at public speaking. You got to work at it. Man, I hated public speaking when I was in high school. I hated it in college. Even when I started teaching, I was a little nervous to get in front of a room full of people. And, my first day, I'm like, wait, I'm in charge. I'm alone. There's nobody here. I got to talk. It made me really nervous. But at the end of the day, this is the kind of stuff that helps prepare you for life. So skill number 1 that I hope you take away from this class is you learn to be a good public speaker. Skill number 2, reading. Reading is just like a sport. It's just like anything else. You got to work hard at it. You're not born a good or bad reader. You get good or bad at reading by working at it, by practicing. If you're not a reader, read more. If you're a slow reader, read more. And the more you read, the more you'll build your vocabulary, the more you'll build those habits in your brain, and the better you'll become at it. Good readers tend to be people who work at it a lot. They read. And I know it's a circular problem, right? You don't like to read because you're not good at it, but you're not good at it because you never try it, right? When I started playing hockey, I wasn't very good at taking a slap shot because I never did. I never practiced, never tried it. And if I've never done it before, it's hard to be good at something. You're not born good or bad at something. You got to put in the effort. You got to work hard to get there. And so the more you read, the more you think about what you're reading, the better off you'll be no matter what you go into. Because good luck finding a job where you don't have to read at least some parts of your job, some parts of your life. The third skill that you'll take away from this class, hopefully, is to be a better writer. No matter what you go into, you're going to have to write, whether it's just a dinky email, whether it's a proposal. Not everybody's going to be writing a book. Not everybody's going to write every single day of their life, but writing is a form of communication, and if you can't communicate with people, you're not going to be very successful. I have a buddy, he's brilliant. He's a cook. He's a chef. He wants to open his own business. He is probably one of the best chefs I've ever met in my life. He is an amazing cook. He's amazing at what he does. But the problem that he and his wife have is that they're not rich. They can't afford to open a restaurant on their own. And so he needs somebody to fund him. He needs somebody to buy into his idea, into his vision of starting his own business. But in order to get somebody to buy in, he's got to convince them to meet with him first. And his biggest weakness is he's a poor writer. He's not very good at putting stuff down onto a sheet of paper what he wants to do. Now, when he actually does it, he executes perfect. He's awesome at what he does. But trying to convince somebody who's got a lot of money to let him use some of that money to start a business, he's really struggling right now because he doesn't have that skill. He is not a very good writer, and it's impacting him. Trying to get a job, I mean any kind of job, when you fill out an application, the first thing that people start to chuck out is if you don't write well. When I applied to do my student teaching, eventually when I was accepted, the teacher I did my student teaching with said, "Hey, did you ever want to know why we picked you and not somebody else?" And I said, "Sure." He said, "Well, the first thing we did is we looked at your essay. Out of the 10 essays we received, yours was the only one that didn't have any spelling or grammatical mistakes." So, God, man, right? Probably writing too fast or talking, who knows? Whatever the reason, no pun intended, right? Whatever the reason for me doing that is, nobody really cares, right? It's just if you're reading my application and I got a lot of words that are misspelled and a lot of things that just don't look right, people judge you based on it. Every step you take, every move you make, everything you do, people are judging you. And so becoming a better writer will help you. But probably even more important than public speaking, reading, or writing, the one skill that I hope you take away from this class is critical thinking. I hope you learn to think about the world around you. I hope you think about the decisions that are made around you, the decisions that impact you. I hope you don't just write down everything I say and memorize it. Because if you do, you're missing part of the game. You're missing part of what makes school important. There are so many classes out there where you're just asked to memorize stuff, and you're never able to work with it. One of my big failures in life was Spanish class. I always struggled with Spanish when I was in high school. One of the reasons why I struggled with Spanish is I was a really good memorizer. For me, my high school career was memorizing a lot of stuff. I could sit there the night before, I could memorize stuff, and then I could take a test, I could fill out stuff, and then I'd forget it the next day. But it turns out when I had Spanish class, it wasn't just about memorization. It was about critically thinking and processing. It was about making sentences and conjugating verbs. And when it came to doing all that stuff, I really wasn't learning the material. I was just memorizing the material and spitting it back. And so I hope that throughout the course of this class you think critically about what I say. You don't have to agree with everything I say. I encourage you to get involved. I encourage you to question, to ask questions, to look for examples, to think about what I say. Because, hey, I'm not always right, and I don't always have the best idea. I want, when you walk away from this class, I want you to be a critical thinker. I want you to think about the world that you're in and the impact that that has on you. Any questions? All right.